Is Ayn Rand the first philosopher to identify the intrinsic, subjective, objective trichotomy, or did someone else do that first?
Certainly in those terms, she is. I can't think of someone else who I would say did that, although on certain issues that are instances of it, you might be able to find someone objecting to both sides. And there are certainly a lot of cases where you have what are called debates between objective and subjective. Objective meaning what objectivism means by intrinsic, or debates between people called realists or anti-realists about something, where there are people saying, no, neither of these is quite right. There's something sort of either in between them or something. So you'll find a lot of cases where there are people doing that sort of thing. And I think that that is, in a way, objecting to, it's pushing back against that dichotomy. But the real trick is figuring out what's wrong with them and what the alternative is. And I can't think of anyone who's done that other than Rand, and certainly not anyone who's done it before Rand. Someone saying my valuing course needs to be a book, but the value, sorry if I'm picking up on chats without super chats, but the valuing course from Ocon back whenever that was, is just a sort of rough draft of, not rough, but it's a kind of prep for chapter 3 of A Companion to Ayn Rand. And that's already a book. So, so if you're interested in that course, just read the 3rd chapter of A Companion to Ayn Rand, which is on her view of values.
Good. Egoism and egotism, the same thing. Is egotism more like greed is good and, hey, I'm great and I know it and you should all be aware of that?
I know this is a kind of lexicography question. It's one that Ayn Rand, I mean, if you read the definition of the introduction to the 25th anniversary edition of The Fountainhead, she mentions having used the word egotist somewhere in the book, where she would now use egoist, and a dictionary that she read, she thought misled her on this. But I don't think of this as a really a philosophical question. There are, I think it's for philosophy to figure out what things deserve concepts, what grouping, and it's not only philosophy, but also people who are experts on the particular subject matter of the thing. But since this is a moral concept, it's for philosophers to figure out what groupings of things belong together and should have concepts. And then there are words that are in common usage, and you think about, like, is this word really stand for this concept? And I think when people draw distinctions between very closely related words, egoism and egotism, or knowledge and understanding, or whatever, it's not that the language already has those two clear-cut, distinct concepts well formed in the language, and these two words happen to be that. People are generally confused. The concepts are generally vague in people's minds, and there are two near synonyms. And somebody who sees that there's an important distinction to be made distinguishes them and picks one word for one and one for the other. And there could be lexicographical reasons that make it a little better to choose one or another. But I don't think it's that important. If somebody wanted to use egotism the way we use egoism, I wouldn't be scandalized. I don't think we need a concept for another concept that's a negative concept related to egoism or selfishness. And so I don't really think there's a need for egotism. I know this is something you've talked a little bit about.
Yeah, because I always think there is a need for a concept.
So I'll say a bit about why I think but if you did need one, it would not be good to have one that's like one letter apart. It would be too confusing. The reason why I don't think we need one, or I don't think we should have one, is if you think about all the actions that are actually bad that get called selfish, like if you think about the actions that get called selfish, some of them are good and some of them are actually bad. And if you think of all the ones that are actually bad, what do they have in common? Well, they have in common what all bad actions have. They're irrational. Okay, do they have anything more in common, though, that puts them all together into one group and has to do with the self that not all irrational actions have? And I think no, there are important subgroups of them that do. And those subgroups, I think, deserve names. So like some of them are inconsiderate. Yeah. But like if someone cuts you off in traffic and leaves a really poor tip, all right, I'd say those guys maybe are being inconsiderate. But like, I wouldn't say Bernie Madoff is inconsiderate. I mean, he's not considerate, but that's not the problem with him. It's not the same problem with him as with the guy who's a poor tipper. And if somebody, starts a war to exploit, to steal things from people. I mean, I just don't think these people are enough alike, other than they're being evil, that or bad, that I would, because the bad tipper is not evil, he's just a little insensitive or something. So I think if one looks at these cases, they fall into categories, and one needs words for the categories. And some of them, the essential is like, they're not thoughtful enough about other people. And that's the one that I kind of be tempted to, is most tempting to call it selfish. But, and you want another word for, but I think something like thoughtless, inconsiderate, maybe even self-centered is good for them, but it doesn't cover like Hitler or Bernie Madoff or someone who's a real like predatory villain. And I think it shouldn't. I think like what's wrong with them is something different from what's wrong with the guy who's just inconsiderate or entitled or whatever. And we need separate words. Other than that, they're both bad.
But you could probably differentiate between different altruists, right? Different actions that are altruism. Where and I can't think of examples, so that's bad. But where one would be more like the inconsiderate and the other one would be more like downright evil. And yet we do want to lump them together under one concept. But that's why is it that we don't with, let's say, people who are, well, what characterizes these people? They are irrational, certainly. Part of what's emphasized there is, but then they're not thinking of others, right? And they're not thinking of self. They're thinking of neither self nor others.
But that's the irrationalism of it. So they're not thinking. So you can say they're thoughtless. But so the reason why it's right to put the altruists together, right, is there's a fundamental common thing that's wrong with them, namely that they're sacrificing themselves. And they're different, doing it in different ways, but there's a fundamental that's in common. There's no fundamental that's in common to all non-altruistic evil people, as far as I could tell, other than that they're evil and not altruistic. And just the negative isn't. So the fundamental that puts them all together is irrational. And what selfish used as a negative is trying to do is trying to make you think that what holds them all together is something other than what really does, and then trying to get you to put John Rockefeller into the same category. But it's plausible. So I don't think there can be another concept for bad at the same level of generality as that. But then if you go to sub pockets of them, like what's wrong with this guy? He's inconsiderate. He's short-sighted. He's doesn't take other people's context into account. That's not what's wrong with a con man, though. The con man is very busy taking other people's context into account so as to cheat them out of money. So he's a predator. That's what's wrong with him. Whereas the guy who cut someone off in traffic isn't a predator. He's just thoughtless with respect to other people. And I think there were 2 or 3 categories of people like this, some of them very bad, some of them a little bad, that need words. And those words are subdivisions of bad. They're not equivalent.
And is self-destructive too broad?
Yeah, because it's kind of good as a rhetorical point. He's not selfish, he's self-destructive. But the self-destructive captures that he's bad in general. So it's not capturing the particular badness as it relates to other people.
Same would be true of selfless. Right? Selfless.
That's better, I think, but it's still not capturing the specific. It's not naming the point that's right about what people have in mind when they say selfish there, which is that he's not enough concerned about other people in a context where in some of the cases they're pointing to, he should be. So like he doesn't recognize the value of friendship. He doesn't recognize that other people have rights. He doesn't. So I would pick like if there is something wrong with the example we're thinking about, that person's relation to others or view of others, I would try to identify that wrongness and say, he's not selfish, he's a predator. And it's not selfish to be a predator because it's not good for you to be a predator. He's not selfish. He's thoughtless and inconsiderate. And it's not selfish to be thoughtless and inconsiderate because you're harming other people and you're not getting the tremendous benefits there could be from the personal relationships with them if only you put a little bit of effort in to understand their side of things. So I would do it 2 steps. Here's what's wrong with him, and here's why having that thing wrong with you is not good for you, and so not selfish. That's
good.
And to begin with, I wonder if I can ask you to capsulize. I know this is difficult. Can I ask you to capsulize your philosophy? What is Randism?
First of all, I do not call it Randism, and I don't like that name. I call it Objectivism.
All right.
Meaning a philosophy based on objective reality. Now let me explain it as briefly as I can. First, my philosophy is based on the concept that reality exists as an objective absolute, that man's mind, reason, is his means of perceiving it, and that man needs a rational morality. I am primarily the creator of a new code of morality which has so far been believed impossible, namely a morality not based on faith.
On faith?
Not on faith, not on arbitrary whim, not on emotion, not on arbitrary edict, mystical or social, but on reason, a morality which can be proved by means of logic, which can be demonstrated to be true and necessary.
All right, all right.
Now, may I define what my morality is?
All right.
Because this is merely an introduction. My morality is based on man's life as a standard of value. And since man's mind is his basic means of survival, I hold that if man wants to live on earth and to live as a human being, he has to hold reason as an absolute, by which I mean that he has to hold reason as his only guide to action, and that he must live by the independent judgment of his own mind, that his highest moral purpose is the achievement of his own happiness, and that he must not force other people, nor accept their right to force him, that each man must live as an end in himself and follow his own rational self-interest.
May I?
All right, before we go on, reminder, please like the show. We've got 163 live listeners right now, 30 likes. That should be at least 100. I figure at least 100 of you actually like the show. Maybe there are like 60 of the Matthews out there who hate it. But at least the people who are liking it, you know, I want to see a thumbs up. There you go. Start liking it. I want to see that go to 100. All it takes is a click of a thing, whether you're looking at this. And you know, the likes matter. It's not an issue of my ego. It's an issue of the algorithm. The more you like something, the more the algorithm likes it. So, you know, and if you don't like the show, give it a thumbs down. Let's see your actual views being reflected in the likes. But if you like it, don't just sit there. Help get the show promoted. Of course, you should also share. And you can support the show at JeronBrookShow.com/support, or on Patreon or Subscribestar or Locals, and show your support for the work, for the value hopefully you're receiving from this. And of course, don't forget, if you're not a subscriber, even if you just come here to troll, or even if you're here like Matthew to defend Marx, then you should subscribe, because that way you'll know when to show up. You'll know what shows are on, when they're on. You'll get notified, right? So, yes, like, share, subscribe, support. Like, share, subscribe, support. There you go. Easy. Do one or all of those, please.